The call came to me about 9:15 p.m. and said, listen, Kelley's been in a bad wreck. I said, is she hurt? And he says, yes, she's hurt bad. I said, is she going to make it? He said, I don't know. And I said, I'll get there as quick as I can. Where am I going? He said, go to LSU. That's where they're taking her. Kelley and I first met, she was a freshman. And of course, she wouldn't have anything to do with me. And about my senior year in high school, I started noticing that she was really cute. A couple years out of high school and her almost finished up college, we ended up dating. Dated for a couple of years, and we've been married for 28 years.
I remember my brother and dad were dove hunting, and me and my mom went to church. And I normally would sit with the youth group with all my friends, and I just had a weird feeling that I should sit with my mom today.
Me and Dad went dove hunting that morning like always with some of our buddies. Had a good time and everything. Hung out with all our friends, family, stuff like that, and then got a phone call.
It was the end of my son's freshman year, and we had purchased a house in Ruston for him to live in. And of course, it needed a lot of updating. I was actually under the house. We had ended up with a last-minute plumbing issue. Of course, it was Memorial Weekend, and he moved in the next day. And I actually got a phone call while I was under the house. And it was my uncle, which was is a Bossier City fireman, and said, I got some bad news for you. It looks, Kelley was involved in a bad wreck. Doesn't look like she's going to make it.
We had settled in for the evening, and we heard this horrific explosion is what it sounded like. Without hesitation, I jumped up, grabbed my keys, and drove my car to the end of the boulevard. And my husband called 911, and I went over to her car, and I assessed for a pulse, and I didn't have one. There was glass everywhere, airbags deployed, I think every airbag in her vehicle. Her arm was hanging out the window, and her head was hanging down. And I could see everything else right on her chest. I guess I went into mom mode. And that could have been my child. As much as my children drive back and forth, I would want to know that somebody was with them, even if the outcome wasn't a good outcome, because nobody wants to be alone.
Probably took less than a minute to get there. We right around the corner, took a left, and we're there. And we see one vehicle, the Jeep, in the turn lane, and Kelley's car almost off the highway. It was bad. Probably one of the worst ones I'd seen. You know, the car was heavily damaged, and as soon as we saw Kelley in there, and you know, she was alive, you know, she was moaning, and so Engine 9 does have some extrication tools on it. We immediately deployed them and started working on the car.
They were working on the driver's side, trying to get her where they could get her out. The paramedics were working from the other side.
There's a technique called rolling the dash. We did that, and the brake pedal was still around her ankle, and I lifted, turned it one more time, and it spread out a little more, and I saw daylight, and that's when I picked her up and pulled her out.
It was a load and go. Once they got her out, they were in the ambulance and they were gone.
I'd heard somebody say, this is Kelley Wyatt. I've known Kelley since high school, and the person that I've seen in that car didn't look like Kelley. Then I saw her face in the lights of the back of the ambulance, and I knew it was Kelley.
Once, you know, one person knew, then another called, what can I do, what's going on? So I ended up having somebody go to the hospital and call me with information.
She came as a Tier 1, Level 1 activation, which is the highest grade of trauma injury a patient can sustain. And she had a severe head injury on a grade of from a mild, moderate to the severe. She had the most extreme spectrum of head injury, as well as she had a punctured lung for which she could have died on the scene if there was not timely interventions done in terms of securing the airway and decompressing the chest.
When she came in, our team, was quickly involved in her care because it was pretty apparent that she had a brain injury. She had a CT scan done initially, which showed no major massive hemorrhage in the brain, but she had evidence of something that we call DAI, which is diffuse axonal injury, where these little kind of tiny punctate hemorrhages are seen, typically deep in the brain. And that's a sign that, her brain, even though there was no large hemorrhage or large pressure-inducing lesion in the brain, that there was some significant brain injury to cause the brain to kind of shear back and forth within the skull, leading to these small hemorrhages and leading to her, not being able to be interactive and following commands.
She suffered a bad proximal humerus fracture. She suffered an elbow fracture. She had bilateral wrist fractures. She had a severe comminuted, crunched up, and open femur fracture. She had an open patella fracture, meaning the skin is open, the bone is exposed. She had an open injury to her proximal shin or tibia. All these were complex fractures. She also had injury to her right lower extremity as well, soft tissue injury.
I was told she probably didn't stand a good chance of making it. There was a lot of, she had flail ribs on both sides, collapsed lungs on both sides, head trauma. She had bones sticking out of her legs. She had all kind of stuff going on.
It was really hard. I remember talking to one of my best friends, and we were sitting at Nuke's and we were eating, and I just started crying, and I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this. 2 days ago, my mom was running and doing all these things, and now I'm being told that she may never be able to talk to me again.
Initially, when she first came in, we urgently had to address the open fractures of the leg. There was certainly the risk of loss of the leg or infection that could make her sick and put more stress on her body. Those had to be stabilized really within the first 48 hours. It was planned that she was going to undergo several stage procedures, including washing out the wounds, additional fixation. She suffered a proximal femur or left hip injury as well. That was, once the lower portions of the leg had been stabilized, that had to be addressed. Her shoulder, although it was a bad fracture, a decision was made to proceed with as little fixation as possible, and so pins were placed through the skin. A plate and screw was placed on the elbow. Fixation was applied to the hip, meaning screws. She had a fixation to her femur fracture. She had pins and wires placed into her kneecap and a plate and screws placed in her tibia. This was done over a series of several weeks after her initial injury.
It is important to realize that when she came early in the trauma bay, it was a matter of every second and minutes in order in terms of her acuity of injuries to stabilize her. And then we move to the next zone of it becomes hours, and then it becomes days and weeks.
She had a third-degree burn on her ankle. It had been managed by the trauma service for the first part of her hospitalization because her other injuries were much more important. And I think actually we took her to the operating room the next day and did a skin graft. We got a piece of skin from her thigh and moved it down to cover up the wound.
I seem to have always been informed, which was, just enough to worry about things that are out of your control. And to have positive, good or bad information for me to process was real good.
There was relief after the brain surgery and some of the other surgeries because it felt like we were making progress. It wasn't just like, oh, we're at a standstill again. It's we're making progress, we can keep doing this. Every surgery is a new step. Just keep on fighting.
Even someone who's young and healthy, when they have 4 extremities injured, there's a risk of death. We call that mortality. There's certainly going to be morbidity or loss of function in someone who just has those injuries. When you combine that with a closed head injury, it's very severe. She was certainly most at risk for her left leg. The ability to take her to the operating room. We were in communication. Dr. Jablon, our trauma surgeon, particularly was in communication with the trauma team daily to watch when can we take her back to the OR, when's it going to be stable, how can we put her at the least amount of risk. And Kelley was absolutely at very high risk for death, certainly long-term disability with these injuries.
First time I spoke with her was probably 3+ months.
Kelley,
before she opened her eyes. Then my son came home from college.
how are you doing, sugar?
And she tracked him across the room. And from that point, we started seeing little improvements.
The greatest moment of my life probably was this meant yes, this meant no. Dad would ask her a question, do you want cereal this morning? And I mean, that was it. That's the, sorry, hold on. That was the biggest progress that I've ever seen.
Yeah, we were there for 21 days in SICU. It was comforting to know that we had hope. Up until that point, we really didn't know. A lot of assumptions were made, but when you have, these two well-known doctors sit down with you and say, here are the facts. This is where she's going to be, how she's going to gain, what she needs, and came up with a plan, gave us something to shoot for, gave us a plan of action to work at.
Of course, I became very involved in following Kelley's care as she was treated even outside of the region when she went for specialty care in Dallas and other facilities. I coordinated with her physicians there, managing her care and providing the referrals as necessary. One of the neat things was when she really began to recover from her head injury, we were all and continue to be. It just seems like every day, every week, every month, she's better and better.
Even though it took some time to get her awake, I think she woke up and then she started to interact, and then the process of cognitive interaction improvement and physical interaction improvement with therapy and rehab has really, she's really made a remarkable recovery.
Well, on behalf of me and my family, I would say thank you so much.
She went to LSU because LSU is a level 1 trauma center, which is the only one in Shreveport and Bossier City. So any of our trauma calls, whether it's vehicle-related, shooting, whatever major trauma, that always goes to LSU because it is the level 1 trauma center.
They changed our lives. Without them, none of us would be the way that we are now. I'm very thankful for everything they do.
I tell people that I know, something happens, take me there.
The care that's provided for emergency situations at LSU is just unparalleled in Northwest Louisiana. I think the immediate nature of availability of every kind of service that one would need for a traumatic injury, whether it be to the brain or to the chest or to the belly or to the orthopedic system, I think every service that you would need is literally seconds or minutes away.
I can never repay y'all enough for anything. Y'all brought back my mom and helped my mom, and I'll never be able to repay you ever. Thank you so much.
Time is the key. Time is the key essence. If all these disciplines were not working together and were not taking care of Ms. Kelley in timely fashion, the outcome would not have been what we have now.
The walker, 122 feet.
There is no doubt that the LSU trauma system, our level 1 hospital here, saves lives. I honestly feel that most of the community don't know what rolls through those doors every day. The last thing any of our department looks at is someone's ability to pay or their resources outside. The first thing is, how do we take care of this patient? How do we get them better?
Thank you very much. Thank you for loving what you do. Thank you for being there for my wife and my family. Without you, we wouldn't have my wife today. And I will do anything for any of them. All they have to do is ask. I'd do anything for them.
I think God just put the right people around me.